So yeah, I'm gonna take us straight to China. So thank you, Latoya, for kind of making that beautiful segue for me. So this is Lilio. Obviously, this is not him. This is a drawing of him. But he's an 18-year-old young person who I met in Wuhan, China. And Lilio grew up in a very rural part of Anhui province. And for generations, this is a part of the world where parents told their kids that boys marry girls and girls marry boys. And then you go on, you make babies to carry on the family's name. And that's just how it worked for generations. But when I met Lilio, he told me that for most of his life, he actually thought he couldn't fulfill this family expectation because he thought he was born into the wrong gender. He was attracted to males. And so he thought that if he just studied really hard to get into a good college, which actually isn't easy in China, he could just save up and save up money for getting a good job, and then he could have enough money for a sex change. And then as a woman, he would be happy and he could carry out his familial duties. But then Lilio started using the internet, and one day he created a pseudonym to explore QQ, which is one of the most popular Chinese platforms that's pretty much like a combination of Messenger plus Reddit. And on QQ, he discovered all these chat rooms for men who were attracted to other men. And in these chat rooms, he learned the word gay for the first time. And that's what they literally say. They write out the word gay. It's not in Chinese. And with that knowledge, he was able to find thousands of other chat rooms filled with people who shared this common identity of being gay. And that unlocked an entire world of people who were just like him. They taught him about his own sexuality. They taught him that, this was a choice he could make. So he was able to understand more about himself, and for the first time, he felt a sense of belonging. Now, this is something that he could not have done if he stayed in his hometown, nor could he have done it, if he moved to a big city. Lilio needed a sense of anonymity to be able to stretch a part of himself that he was just so confused about and ashamed about for so long. So in my decade of research in China, I met hundreds of people like Lilio who are exploring their identity through interactions with complete strangers. So when I talk about identity, I use stories from China to illustrate that how people construct their identity in China isn't actually that different from how people do it in the West or elsewhere. People often have this idea of China being this heavy authoritarian place of internet censorship. And yes, that all exists, but oh, it is 6 o'clock. But also stories like Lilio also exist with the same frequency as it does in the West. Teens in the US have dozens of Tumblrs with various pseudonyms, and they often feel more comfortable sharing their day on Snapchat than at the family dinner table. So even in the most extensively surveillance country in the world, and I consider the internet a very public space, that in China, in this very public space, people have found a way to construct anonymity to explore and form one's own identity. And like Lilio, people often find it to be easier to do this around strangers. And the places where we find strangers are what I call informal spaces. These are places where people can meet and interact with strangers, like bars and parks and cities. But it could also be airports or conferences or even the sidewalk. And these are places where people can stretch their identity in different directions because they aren't around people they know. And informal spaces are very different from formal spaces like our homes or families or work or church. They're filled with people we know. Now, formal spaces aren't always the best places to explore our identity because counter to conventional wisdom, when it comes to questions of self-identity, people often feel safer expressing themselves not around people they know, but around strangers. Because the fear of being ashamed or judged happens everywhere. It's not just in China. It's something that I know all of us in this room can relate to. I'm sure that we all have something right now or have had a moment in our life where we didn't feel comfortable sharing something with the people we're closest to. Because sometimes we just need to express ourselves around a stranger. And when I say stranger, I don't think of it as stranger danger, but we can define stranger as someone with just a degree of social distance from our immediate lives. These are people who can listen without any investment in the outcome of what we do. They don't have a stake in every decision we make. So in a networked environment and in a liquid modernity where uncertainty and fluidity are in condition of which we live our lives, strangers actually play an increasingly important role in how we develop a sense of self. They not only help us process our feelings, but they actually help us become who we are. And that's why people feel like they can take risks to try on different possible selves around strangers. So any one person now can have multiple accounts on Twitter, Tumblr, or QQ, and each of these accounts can contain different identities, different worlds, and different values, and actually all being played out at the very same time. Teens can express themselves through a fashion blog about, where they feature clothing that they're just not comfortable yet wearing at home or at school. But people also often change their usernames, dozens of times in 1 month because they want to express a different idea or be perceived differently. And even somebody who thinks that they have radical political views can find extremist groups to connect with. And all three of these people can be the same person at the very same time. So this newfound ability to shape-shift our identity through social media is all a manifestation of what I've come to call the elastic self. It unfolds in informal spaces where identity can be malleable, where there's a ready supply of strangers, and where there's some level of anonymity is possible. An elastic self comes out of this very network behavior that I just described, the act of moving out of our formal spaces of, family and work and into informal spaces where we can connect with people we don't know, and where these interactions can then unlock new parts of ourselves. So as our networks expand, so do we. And we now have seemingly infinite numbers of ways to shape our identity, which helps explain many of the things that Paula just introduced to us. So this remarkable change has unfolded within our lifetime. One of the most profound revolutions of the digital age is a revolution of the self. However, we might be killing this very revolution that we have enabled. While we have radically reduced the barriers to explore the self, we are now creating a digital experience that tries to enforce real name policies and persistent tracking. So think of your Facebook account where you're forced to use your real name, or think of how easy it is to log into different sites with your Facebook login. And while that actually makes it really easy for you to not have to remember all these usernames and different passwords, what that also means is that this one company is able to track all of your behavior and all the sites you're using. Now, in some countries, this is being implemented on a policy level. So in China, the government has been trying to enforce social media companies to only allow users to sign up for an account if it's checked against your government ID cards. So all of these real name policies tie more of our experiences, our thoughts, and our desires into a single identity. So the benefit of this is that, we know who people are, we can verify who we're talking to, maybe large corporations can offer more personalized computing experiences, and advertisers can target us with, better reliability. But this all comes at an expense. We're killing our ability to create and imagine new selves. Informal spaces disappear, and with it, so does access to strangers. And altogether, this has a very chilling effect on people's ability to explore who they could be or want to be beyond the circumstances of family or work. Because without access to informal spaces, we're only around people we know. And then our ability to be elastic goes away, or worse off, it's just not activated. Now, anonymity, it may not be important to everyone, but the ability to be anonymous is actually critical for anyone who is marginalized or anyone who wants to express ideas that, run against the dominant norms. The privileged are the ones who benefit the most from a persistent identity, while the disenfranchised are the ones who suffer the most. And this would be the same if we were talking about race or citizenship or gender. Now, the great thing is that people are starting to recognize this importance of the elastic self. I see this in my field work where I interview, people around the world, and I talk to them about how they're using the internet, and I'm seeing them participating in delete culture, where people are actively deleting stuff because they don't want to be tracked. Or I see this on the policy level with the EU's, Right to be Forgotten Act, or in California's Erase Button law that allows minors to delete their data. And I'm also seeing it in the corporations or even institutions that I'm working with, where they're really trying to be sensitive, to understanding what does it mean when the people we're trying to serve or, no longer want to have a single identity or want the option to be anonymous, and they want the ability to actually connect with unrelated individuals. So some of the greatest achievements of the past few decades have actually come from collaborations between unrelated individuals. Think Wikipedia, there's Linux, there's a social web, or Arab Spring. When we think about all these things, we have to think about the conditions in which they arose, which included access to informal space, where they could actually talk to people and not be scared that they're going to express ideas that would put them in danger. Now, some would like us to believe that being digital and being anonymous are incompatible or even impossible, but it's not true. By putting a permalink on everything, by making everything searchable, indexable, scrapable, it's optimizing for Google, Facebook, China, but it's not necessarily optimizing for humanity. So now that we're all aware of our elastic selves, or this ability to be elastic, we all need to ask, how do we preserve it? So finding the answer to this question will be one of the most important collaborations between unrelated individuals. Thank you.